I know it's been a few days, but now I'm back. And I'm back with a wonderful book on Mughal history. The book is called Gulbadan Portrait of a Princess at the Mughal Court. It was written many years ago by Rumer Godden, but I suppose nothing much has changed when it comes to Mughal history, so the timing of the book is not really relevant here. And when you look at the title, it seems like that it is going to be the biography of this Mughal princess who was the daughter of Emperor Babur, who was really the founder of Mughal dynasty in India. But it is not really that. Of course, it talks about this princess, her life, her journey, but most of the time, this book tells the story of the Mughal emperors, what's going on in the Mughal Empire, through the eyes of this princess called Gulbadan. So, more than herself, her own life, it focuses on the empire and the broader picture, what's going around, especially in the royal circles. Just to let you know, this is going to be a three-part podcast. In the first part, we'll discuss the life and times of Emperor Babur. Then, in the second part, we come to his son Humayun, and in the third part, we get to Akbar. And I will narrate along the way certain passages from the book, and in between, I will keep adding my comments, my observations with you. So let's start there. Let's start with how Gulbadan, the princess, who was the daughter of Babur, how she viewed her father. What was her memory of her father? And I'm going to quote a passage from the book. It says, "At 2 years old, perhaps 3, Gulbadan had seen Babur ride away with his horsemen, banners, and pennants. He was always riding away. Even after he had established his court in Kabul, his womenfolk seldom knew until weeks afterwards where he had been, how he had been, how a battle had gone. They didn't know anything." So that really sounds like a typical medieval royal courtly life, because the women, they lived their own lives. They didn't know much about what was going on in the battlefields, in the politics, all around that. So that's how it began. Now let's just focus on the ancestry a bit here. From his mother's side, Babur was descended from Chinggis Khan, or some like to call him Genghis Khan, and on his father's side from Timur land. So that was a strange mixture of the Mongol, who were the rough, the adventurous, cruel nomads of the steppes of Central Asia, and of the Timurids, who were really the warriors, but they had their long history of their own culture. One interesting thing to notice here is that in those times the word Mongol, and which subsequently turned into Mughal, that had come to mean barbarian. So these Mughals, and particularly Babur for sure, they never liked to use the word Mughal or Mongols with them. We now call them Mughals, that's a different matter, but they themselves, they never liked it. So from this we know that two of his ancestors, both from mother and father's side, they were great conquerors. Genghis Khan's territories, as you would know, they stretched from east, that is in China, and west through Russia, Poland, Hungary, all those countries. And on the other hand, Tamerlane's empire, that also stretched quite far into the east to India, and then on to the west towards Caspian Sea. Coming to his birth, Babur was born in 1483, which is late 15th century, in the country that we now know as Uzbekistan. It was a valley north of the river Oxus, and it's now called Ammu. At that time, it was a little chieftain state of Fergana. Babur has written about his father, and what he says is that father he was a warrior. He wanted to go on conquests, but at the same time, he was also quite settled and comfortable in his fertile valley of grain and fruit, where things were quite comfortable and peasants were fat. In fact, his father was quite fat himself. And when Babur was around 11 or 12 years old, that time the father died, and Babur at that age became the king of the small state, Fargana. And even though he really loved that place, it was not really big enough to content him. And so, in his early days, in fact, when he was still in his teen years, he started to conquer nearby cities and valleys. And one of the first conquests was in the city of Samarkand, which was quite a remarkable city at the time, and a lot of people had interest in it. And after months of siege, finally Babur took it. Of course, it was natural at that time that many of his soldiers wanted to loot and destroy the city, but Babur had other plans. He said that if instead of really destroying the city, what if we levy taxation here? And then that's a more sustainable way to rule a place. And that was the kind of strategy which, of course, many other rulers in medieval era employed, but it was quite a smart strategy that you don't destroy your enemy, but instead you use them to pay your taxes, and that helps to sustain your economy, and that really pays for everything. Another thing that we need to keep in mind in these medieval times is there were highly volatile places and cities and states. It wasn't like if Babur had conquered one place, it would stay him for a long time. No, that wouldn't happen. In a few months, somebody else would take over, then he has to fight back. The territories would keep changing very quickly. So there was a lot of instability around. So he was there in Central Asia, and at some point Babur moved to the Afghan city Kabul. How that happened? One of his uncles, who was from the Timurid princes, he died, and he was controlling the city of Kabul at that time. And it was the right opportunity, so Babur moved from Central Asia towards Kabul, and he spent many years over there. He got married and had a lot of children over there, and he really, really loved the city. It was beautiful, there was a sense of security, he enjoyed his presence being there, and it kind of gave him a new self, because all his rough wandering life, he had lived in small places where there was not really a lot of trade, there was not a lot of cultural activity. But here in Kabul, there were so many languages, so much cultural exchange that was going on, because the city lay in the great trade routes of from China, India to Turkey and beyond. And whether you see in terms of economic activity or cultural activity, there was a lot happening at the time. And because of that, you got a lot of interesting products and even people, because the slave trade was quite well there. And in fact, it was here in this city Babur's first love, when he was himself a boy, and he found his first love, which was also towards a boy. And it was a slave boy called Babri, and I don't need to go into the history what the name tells you, but it's quite interesting because considering the religion, culture, times, you would think that such kind of romance, such kind of love affair would be a taboo, but Babur wrote about it in in his biography, and a couple of lines that I'm going to quote. He says, "I was mad, deranged, nor did I know that such is his state who is enamored of a fairy face." Interestingly, as far as we know of history, Babur never wrote such beautiful romantic verses for any of his wives. So that tells you quite a bit. But if you still have to pick one among all his wives, you would say it was his wife, Maham, and he called her my moon, and the first child of hers was called Humayun, who later became the emperor in the Mughal Empire. So, yes, Maham was quite powerful. She was also quite moody, and it seems from the records that Babur denied her nothing. And of course, it was her son that became the prince and later the emperor. So it was in the court of Kabul that the children of Babur and other important figures, they were growing up. And let me now read a couple of paragraphs which will tell you about the settings, what was going on there, what was the atmosphere like for these little ones. So here we go. In the court of Kabul, boys and girls seem to have been educated together, though the girls, sitting on cushions or at the master's feet, are always shown attended by their mammas. The schoolrooms were furnished with small crossed bookstands for reading, tablets for writing. They must have used ink, as Babur once sent Hindal a jeweled inkstand. The discipline was severe. In one school picture, a boy is having his feet bastinadoed by another, while below a nurse is driving a small boy to his lessons with a stick. The children would have learned calculating, poetry, reading, and writing. Like men who have had scant education, Babur attached great importance to books. One of his greatest excitements was when he captured the fort of Milwat and found in the library a number of valuable books. Characteristically, some of them he gave to Humayun and some sent to Kamran. Gulbadan might have known those sent to Kamran, as the prince, though a boy, was still in charge of the women and, as can be seen later, had a soft spot for his little sister. Babur wanted his sons to be versed in the art of writing. If he had not been so great and constant a warrior, he himself could have been a true poet, as he shows in the parts of his memoir that he wrote himself. When he dictated, he fell into verbosity and tedium. Even when Humayun was grown up, Babur wrote to him, "You certainly do not excel in letter writing, and you fail because you have too great a desire to show off. For the future, write unaffectedly, clearly, and in plain words, which give less trouble to writer and reader." So, this was more about the life of children, young ones who were growing up. What about the life of women? How they were living their lives and how they were getting entertained. That also we find in the book. And let me narrate a few paragraphs once again. and you will find the answer. Dancing girls may seem a strange gift for a man to give his wives, but Babur knew, as all thoughtful husbands know, that if women live in a small enclosed world and are to be happy, there's a need for constant change, interest, recreation. This was the reason for the endless feasts, for, as an instance, birthdays. When a royal boy was born, the ladies tied a knot in a yellow thread, and another knot was added on the same day every year. As the knots increased, so did his weight, and he was weighed, usually against money, which was then given to the people with a feast. There was a feast for his circumcision too, and of course for his marriage. The women went on shikar, though it was only one or two who actually shot. They went hawking and practiced archery. One of the crafts of the harem was the making of archery thumb rings. Some of the princesses made their own silver, crystal, even horsechair, because in Persian fashion they drew the bowstring with their thumbs. They watched polo from the citadel walls, rode, went for picnics. There were games, cards, chess, and a kind of ludo. Acrobats and jugglers could be watched, perhaps a snake charmer from Hind. There were jesters and storytellers and reciters, particularly one woman, Sarvkad, straight as a cypress. She was to make, as it were, a background of song and story almost all through Gulbadan's life. There was music for every occasion. The court musicians played flutes, lutes, long-necked or short-necked, cymbals, drums. All this the ladies were accustomed to, but the Hindu dancing girls were more than a novel amusement. They were the first sight of a new world. High-born or low-born, Muslim women were covered from head to foot. They wore a long chemise with tight sleeves and over it another, but looser. Indeed, sometimes the royal ladies had 4 layers of clothes, open at the neck and hemline to show one below the other. The girls wore caps, often with tassels, but for married women there was a high cone headdress ending in a plume of feathers, and from it hung a veil that was brought round the neck and fastened with perhaps a string of pearls. When they went out, they covered themselves with long veils, forerunners of the burqas, or as Gulbadan calls them, head-to-foot dresses, though in the Kabul days the veils did not cover the face. Now the harem saw the Hindu girls in cholis, tiny bodices fitting under the breasts, leaving a bare midriff, white skirts but of gauze through which legs, though trousered, could be seen, feet bare as was the head, the hair sometimes in a plait, left swinging, sometimes gathered in a knot, circled with flowers. The imperial ladies had thought they were versed in makeup. Timid women used once to cover their faces with a white paste. It looked like a mask but kept out the sun and wind. This had gradually been reduced to a cheek paste. Sometimes eyebrows were blackened and a red beauty spot painted on the forehead, but now the ladies saw eyes, not discreet but eloquently used, made bolder with kohl. Palms of hands and soles of feet drew attention because they were reddened with vermilion. Everyone was accustomed to earrings, but a nose ring? The jewel in the nose ring of a dancing girl was like a crest, an insignia, showing to whom she belonged, as each Raja owner had his particular jewel. With these were precious cut sapphires, emeralds, diamonds, rubies. They sent sparkles as the girl breathed, and as she danced and breathed harder, sparkled more seductively. Undulating hips the Muslims were used to, Belly dancing, as it is called now, was the mark of Muslim dancing girls, but they had never seen the subtle movement of neck and head and shoulders, the intoxicating movements of Hindu dance. Though used to music, the throbbing of the tabla drums was new and disturbing, as were the tiny silver thumb and finger cymbals the girls used for percussion, and the tinkling of anklet bells, a music made with heel and toe. So clearly, you're seeing this wonderful amalgamation of cultures. These conquerors, they are coming from one culture and now they're being exposed to another, where the lifestyles, the dresses, all these things are quite different, and there are certain cultural shocks, and all that is happening. But remember, at this point in time, Babur was still in Kabul, and there was limited exposure of India. What happens next when he comes to India and establishes the Mughal Empire in the north of India? What happens then? That's something that we'll find out and discuss in the next episode. So stay tuned, and I'll bring you the next part of the story. Thank you very much for listening. I'll catch you the next time.